भगवते ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Sarjan, Creation, Chapter 6, Sri Narad and Vyasadev, no Samvad, conversation between Narad and Vyasadev. 20, verse 20. Evam yatantam vijane mamaha gochiro giram gambhirashlakshnaya vacha shuchah prashamayanniva.
Seeing my attempts in that lonely place, the personality of Godhead, who is transcendental to all mundane description, spoke to me with gravity and pleasing words, just to mitigate my grief.
Hantasmin janamane bhavan mamam drashtumiharhite avipakvakashayanam durdashoham kuyoginam.
O Narad, the Lord spoke. I regret that during this lifetime you will not be able to see me anymore. Those who are incomplete in service and who are not completely free from all material taints can hardly see me.
Sakrudyad darshitam rupam etat kamayate nagar matkamah shanakaihi sadhu sarvan munchita hachayan.
O virtuous one, you have only once seen my person, and this is just to increase your desire for me, because the more you hanker for me, the more you will be freed from all material desires.
Satsevaya dirkayapi chata mayi dradhamatihi hitva vidyam imam lokam gantamajjanatamasi.
By service of the absolute truth, even for a few days, a devotee attains firm and fixed intelligence in me. Consequently, he goes on to become my associate in the transcendental world after giving up the present deplorable material worlds.
Matirmayi nibaddeyam na vipadyeta kahichit praja sarginiro depi srutischa madanugraha.
Intelligence engaged in my devotion cannot be thwarted at any time, at the time as well as at the time of annihilation. Your remembrance will continue by my mercy.
Etavaduktavo pararam tanmahal bhutam na bhulingam lingamishwaram aham cha tasmai mahatam mahiyase shishnagamam vidde anukampitah.
Then that supreme authority, personified by sound and unseen by eyes, but most wonderful, stopped speaking. Feeling a sense of gratitude, I offered my obeisances unto him, bowing my head.
नामान्यनन्तस्य हत्तत्रपः पठन् गुह्यानि भद्राणि कृतानि च स्मरन् गाम्पर्यटं स्तुष्टमनागतः स्पृहः कालं प्रतीक्षन् विबदो विमत्सरः.
Thus I began chanting the holy name and fame of the Lord by repeated recitation, ignoring all the formalities of the material world. Such chanting and remembering of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord are benedictory. So doing, I traveled all over the earth, fully satisfied, humble, and unenvious.
एवं कृष्णमते ब्रह्मन् न आसक्तस्याम् आत्मनः कालः प्रादुर्भूत्काले ता सौदामनि यथा.
And so a Brahmana, Vyasadeva, in due course of time, I, who was fully observed in thinking of Krishna and who therefore had no attachments, being completely freed from all material tastes, met with death as lightning and illumination occur simulationally.
प्रयुज्यमाने मयि तां शुद्धां भागवतीं तनुम् आरब्धकर्मनिर्वाणो न्यपतत् पाञ्चभौतिकः.
Having been awarded a transcendental body, befitting an associate of the personality of Godhead, I quit the body made of 5 material elements and thus all acquired fruitive results of work, karma, stopped.
कल्पान्त इदमादाय शयाने अम्बसि उदन्वतः शिशयीशोरनुप्राणं विविशेन्त अर्हं विभोः.
At the end of the millennium, when the personality of Godhead, Lord Narayana, lay down within the water of devastation, Brahma began to enter into him along with all creative elements, and I also entered through his breathing.
सहस्रयुगपर्यन्ते उत्थायेदं शिशुक्षतः ऋषयः प्राणेभ्योऽहं च जिग्निरे.
After 4 million solar years, or 4,000 million solar years, when Brahma awoke to create again by the will of the Lord, all the rishis like Marichi, Angira, Atri, and so on were created from the transcendental body of the Lord, and I also appeared along with them.
अन्तर्बाह्यश्च लोकांस्त्रिन् पर्येम्यस्कन्दितव्रतः अनुग्रहान् महाविष्णो विद्यात् गतिः क्वचित्.
Since then, by the grace of the Almighty Vishnu, I travel everywhere without restriction, both in the transcendental world and in the 3 divisions of the material world. This is because I'm fixed in unbroken devotional service of the Lord.
देवदत्ताम् इमां वीणां स्वर ब्रह्मविभूषितां मूर्छयेत्वा हरे कथां गायमानः चराम्यहम्.
And thus I travel constantly, singing in transcendental message of the glories of the Lord, vibrating this instrument called a veena, which is charged with transcendental sound and which was given to me by Lord Krishna.
प्रगायतः स्ववीर्याणि तीर्थपादः प्रियस्रवः आहूत इव मे शीघ्रं दर्शनं याति चेतसि.
The Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, whose glories and activities are pleasing to hear, at once appears on the seat of my heart, as if called for as soon as I begin to chant his holy activities.
एतत् हि आतुर्चितानां मात्रा स्पर्शेच्छया मुहुः भव सिन्धुप्लवो दृष्टो हरिचर्यानुवर्णनम्.
It is personally experienced by me that those who are always full of cares and anxieties due to desiring contact of the senses with their objects can cross the ocean of nescience as a most suitable boat. The constant chanting of the transcendental activities of the personality of Godhead.
यमादिभिः योगपथैः लोभहतो मुहुः मुकुन्द सेवया यद्वद् तथात्माद्वा शाम्यति.
It is true that by practicing restraint from the senses by the yoga system, one can get relief from the disturbances of the desire and lust. But this is not sufficient to give satisfaction to the soul, for the satisfaction is derived from the devotional service to the personality of Godhead.
सर्वतदिदमाख्यातं यत्पृष्टोऽहं त्वया नग जन्म कर्म रहस्यं मे भवच्चात्मस्तोषणम्.
O Vyasadeva, you are freed from all sins. Thus I have explained my birth and activities for self-realization as you asked. All this will be conducive for your personal satisfaction also.
Sut uvacha evam sambhashya bhagavan narado vasavi sutam amantya vinam ranayan yayo yadrachiko munihi.
Sutta Goswami said, thus addressing Vyasadeva, Srila Narad Muni took leave of him, and vibrating on his veena instrument, he left to wonder at his free will.
Aho devarshirdanyo ayam yat kirtim sharka gandharvanah gayan madhyan idam tantriya ramayatyaturam jagat.
All glory and success to Srila Narad Muni because he glorifies the activities of the personality of Godhead, and so doing it, he himself takes pleasure and also enlivens all the distressed souls of the universe. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. My apologies for any mistake I have made. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Very warm welcome to you this evening. Thank you for inviting me again to take part in Sadhu Sangha. And the verse I've been allocated today is verse 21. So just going through it very quickly. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hanta asmin janmani bhavan mamam drastram iharhati avipakva kashyanam duradraso aham kuyoginam. The Lord is now speaking to Narada. O Narada, the Lord spoke, I regret that during this lifetime, you will not be able to see me anymore. Those who are incomplete in service and who are not completely free from all material taints can hardly see me. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. This is a beautiful purport, ladies and gentlemen. It's Srila Prabhupada packs a lot of punches, so I'll try and read in a general pace so you can actually process what Srila Prabhupada is saying. The personality of Godhead is described in the Bhagavad Gita as the most pure and the supreme and the absolute truth. There is no trace of a tinge of materiality in his person, and thus one who has the slightest tinge of material affection cannot approach him. The beginning of devotional service starts with a point when one is freed from at least two forms of material modes, namely the mode of passion and the mode of ignorance. The result is exhibited by the signs of being freed from kama, lust, and lobh, covetousness. This is to say that one must be freed from the desires of sense satisfaction and avarice for sense gratification. The balanced mode of nature is goodness, and to be completely freed from all material tinges is to become free from the mode of goodness also. To search the audience of God in a lonely forest is considered to be in the mode of goodness. One can go out into the forest to attain spiritual perfection, but it does not mean that one can see the Lord personally there. One must be completely freed from all material attachments and be situated in the plane of transcendence, which alone will help the devotee get in personal touch with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The best method is that one should live in a place where the transcendental form of the Lord is being worshipped. The temple of the Lord is a transcendental place, whereas the forest is a materially good habitation. A neophyte devotee is always recommended to worship the deity of the Lord, Archana, rather than go into the forest to search out the Lord. Devotional service begins from the process of Archana, which is better than going out into the forest. In his present life, which is completely freed from all material hankerings, Sri Narada Muni does not go into the forest, although he can turn every place into Vaikuntha by his presence only. He travels from one planet to another to convert men, gods, kinnaras, gandharvas, rishis, munis, and all others to become devotees of the Lord. By his activities, he has engaged many devotees like Prahlad Maharaj, Dhruva Maharaj, and many others in the transcendental service of the Lord. A pure devotee of the Lord therefore follows the footsteps of the great devotees like Narada and Prahlad and engages his whole time in glorifying the Lord by the process of kirtan. Such a preaching process is transcendental to all material qualities. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnana-anjana-shalakaya Chakshur-unmilitam Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu-padaya Krishna-prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Devam Gaurani Vajrani Nevishesha Sunyadi Vastasthana. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Shri Gadadhara Shivasguru Bhaktivedanta. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of all causes. He is the sole object of our desire. The Supreme Lord, we pray to the Supreme Lord to take shelter of the dust of his lotus feet and the dust of the lotus feet of the Vaishnavas. For the Lord can fulfill, and his devotees can fulfill all our desires to be able to come back to him. The Lord's feet are like mountains that shatter the sins within our hearts. Lust, anger, greed, envy. I'm praying to the Lord that he can remove such impediments. The Lord's feet are the source of the Ganges. They can be so purifying, and at the same time, the Lord's feet are also the source of all the happy rays of sunshine, that when we're in the presence of the Lord, there's only happiness and bliss. So, dear devotees, just taking permission from you to be able to speak something in a sense that can glorify the Lord and his devotee Narada Muni. Srila Prabhupada describes in the purport that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he says in the Bhagavad Gita, is the most pure and the Supreme Absolute. Now, Srila Prabhupada also reinforces to us and reminds us there's no tinge of materiality within the Supreme Person. Whilst material energy comes from the Lord, he's not material in any way, in any significant way or so. Now, last Monday we had a discussion at the end, and one of the things Krishnavani Mataji said was that her realization was that the association of devotees is absolutely important in helping us advance sadhu sangha. And Sailesh Bhai said that it was amazing how the devotees of the Lord, like Narada Muni, who's on his own and as a child, and he's out in the wilderness, but somehow or another, he has the intelligence and the understanding to be able to surrender to the Lord, and such as Prahlad Maharaj and Dhruva Maharaj. One of the things we can learn from the children, or the examples of the children, is that that to be able to connect to the Lord, there's a requirement that we get to our eternal loveliness. Until, they say that children until 5 years old are pure, and they haven't been beaten by or withered by the winds of life. And so one of the things that we can also learn from this, that Srila Prabhupada is telling us, that we can only approach the Lord until we're absolutely pure. And purity means that we're not inflicted by the modes of material nature, and that we're not afflicted by affection. So one of the things Srila Prabhupada says very clearly is that even if there's a slight tinge of material affection, we cannot approach the Lord. So what does Srila Prabhupada mean when he says, material affection? He tells us that because it's also it's our duty to be able to be kind and affectionate and loving. Certainly, if we're raising our children and we're in relationships, that the critical factor in all relationships is love and respect. So does Srila Prabhupada mean that, you know, by not having any material tinge of affection, that there shouldn't be love and affection? No, that's not what Srila Prabhupada is saying, because our duty, because the opposite of love and affection is that we're cold, distant, disengaged, indifferent. And that's not what Srila Prabhupada is saying here. He's saying that when we want to, because often Prabhupada talked about his sister's affection towards him, his father's affection. So we shouldn't get this completely mixed up, because that's part of also our duty in developing loving relationships. But there's something deeper about, whilst it's still material, there is something deeper that we need to be able to get from today's purport, and that is that Srila Prabhupada is saying that we're, you know, the beginning of devotional service starts when we're free from the mode of ignorance and the mode of passion, which means lust, desires. And we discussed last Monday that, you know, dear devotees, desires never ever go away, and the desire to speak never goes away. But if we can dovetail our desires only towards the Lord, that he is the sole object of our desires, then we can actually get somewhere. The other thing Srila Prabhupada is saying is that Kam and Lobh, you know, covetedness, you know, this is mine, I own this, control. These are all symptoms of living in this material world. So until we have that, it's very, very, very difficult for us to actually transcend, or as Srila Prabhupada says, the beginning of devotional service. So what does it mean? The question we have to ask ourselves is, am I in the beginning of devotional service? Because until I'm in the mode of passion and mode of ignorance, I can't, you know, I can't even imagine to come closer to devotional service. So what does mode of ignorance look like? You know, mode of ignorance is, you know, our life view can be being miserable. You know, sometimes we think we're actually going through a process of devotion, but actually a lot of times we may be very miserable people. You know, there's guilt and shame or blame or humiliation. If we're experiencing those kind of things, they are at the lowest level of consciousness. Apathy, despair, you know, condemning, feeling hopeless, grief, even grief, ladies and gentlemen, sits in the mode of ignorance, regret, despondency, fear. And you know, everyone experiences fear, because the conclusion that the Lord Krishna gives at the end of the Bhagavad Gita is, he tells Arjuna, surrender unto me, but do not fear. So fear is something that is always, you know, if we are feeling any tinge of fear, then we are actually operating on a level of ignorance. So, you know, the modes of material nature aren't just that straightforward. They're like a weave of emotions and a view of life and how we process life, and even our relationship with the Lord. If we're in the mode of ignorance, we will see God as condemning, you know, despising, God punitive, that he punishes us. God is vengeful. The mode of passion is really about deep, deep desires, craving, and with that comes disappointment, anger. You know, now some people will say mode of passion is important because, you know, mode of passion is better than ignorance, because at least in the mode of passion you've got to get up and go. But in the mode of ignorance, it's kind of just stuck. There's despondency. So these emotions like lust, anger, greed, envy, they keep us stuck, and they keep us away from devotional service. And if Srila Prabhupada is telling us that the beginning of devotional service is when we are free from passion and ignorance, then we have to also ask ourselves that, you know, am I free from pride? Am I free from irreligion? The mode of goodness. Now, the mode of goodness is probably the part of the trampoline that you can just jump off towards mode of pure goodness. But here Srila Prabhupada is warning us that even in the mode of goodness, goodness is not good enough. So you may say, well, okay, what does that mean? You know, why is it that the mode of goodness is still in the modes? It still keeps us trapped within the material world, as Durga Devi's Trishul is keeping us down. She's keeping us down in this box of goodness, passion, and ignorance. So how can we be free from, you know, the mode of goodness? Well, the mode of goodness carries with it some great risks. One of the risks it brings is pride, you know, pride before the fall. Until we transcend the mode of, even the mode of goodness, we're still at animal consciousness, ladies and gentlemen. It may be shocking to you, but until we come out of even the mode of goodness, we haven't really connected or begun. We've started to get deep into our Krishna consciousness. So in some ways it might sound like, well, this is quite doomed, you know. What does it mean that even if I'm in the mode of goodness, it's not quite there? But here, Srila Prabhupada is telling us that one of the key things about our attitude, that our attitude is not to search for God in a lonely forest. You know, sometimes we think, you know, hell with this, you know, I'm done with relationships, I'm done with sadhu sangha, I'm done with, you know, even issues with devotees or whatever. I'm just going to go into the lonely forest of your home, the lonely forest of, you know, a life where you say, well, you know, I can just get on with life and I don't have to deal with people. But Srila Prabhupada is always telling us, you know, like when Rishi Shonak came recently, Mother Vishaka gave him a beautiful book of Lord Krishna and said, don't try to see God, act in a way that he wants to see you. And so Srila Prabhupada is telling us, don't go to the forest in search, you know, in search of God. Yes, it's in the mode of goodness, but if we really want to attain spiritual perfection, it doesn't mean that we have to be able to see God, that we must be absolutely, what we must be free from is material attachment, or as Srila Prabhupada said, material affection, and then we are on the plane of transcendence. So what does it mean being free from material affection? A great example we can have, which we can imbibe in our own life, ladies and gentlemen, is Bharat Maharaj, who eventually becomes Jad Bharat. Now, Bharat Maharaj was the king of the universe, and he retires and he gives up his royal crown, he gives up his palace, he gives up his family and everything, and he goes to the forest, and the very pious king, almost at the brink of pure goodness, pure sadhu, you know, Suddha Sattva. But what happens? He's alone in the forest, and he must have had some tinge of material affection, because he then sees a deer, and I think he sees the deer being born and the mother was killed, and he saw a helpless deer, and out of compassion for this deer, he started looking after it. And as time went by, he had this deep affection for this deer, to the point that when he was about to die, he was so concerned that the deer would be left alone, all alone in this world, that when Bharat Maharaj died, you know, his whole endeavors to go into the forest and give up and you know, attain spiritual perfection, ended up that he had a body of an animal. Now, fortunately for Bharat Maharaj, he could actually remember his past life even as a deer. So then he spent the rest of his life, you know, in hermitages or outside hermitages, listening to the sages. And eventually, in his following life, he becomes Jad Bharat. So he has the human form of life, but he chooses to be silent and not to speak. So he is almost like an avaduta, you know, he doesn't engage, he's like a misfit in this world, but he chooses to remain silent and quiet just so that he can return back to Godhead. So Srila Prabhupada is telling us the best method is for us to live where the transcendental form of the Lord is being worshipped. And Srila Prabhupada is telling us, live you know, in the temple of the Lord or around the temple of the Lord, and consider that as transcendental. Prabhupada then tells us that the forest is good, is a good material habitation. But he also then reminds us that as a neophyte devotee, it's always recommended that they worship the deity of the Lord, Archana. So it's better than going to the forest. So I don't know where many of you are, because all your cameras are off. So I don't even know who you are or where you are in your devotion. But one of the things here Srila Prabhupada is telling us is, you know, start doing deity worship. Now, some of you may have, you know, different deities, but it's always recommended that we start with a deity. If you know, if you're going to start worshiping, then you start worshiping Gaur Nitai, because Gaur Nitai are the most compassionate form of the Lord. And often, certainly in the manner, and if you have Radha Krishna deities, one has to be very, very careful, because there can be offenses to the deities as well. But by starting to worship these deities of Gaur Nitai, they're so merciful that there aren't any sort of very hard and fast rules, except we follow the verse of the Bhagavad Gita, Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam, that you offer the Lord with love and devotion, even if it's water or a leaf or a flower. So if there's one takeaway you're going to get today is that, you know, if you're not doing devotional service or worship of the Lord, start that. And also start reflecting deeply within our own hearts, you know, that real devotion starts when we are free from passion and ignorance. You know, when there's passion and ignorance, we're bombarded with so many emotions and feelings and experiences. And, you know, if we're feeling humiliation and blame and despair and regret and anxiety and craving and hate and scorn and all of these things, and we're still operating at low levels of consciousness. When Lord Krishna is speaking to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, when the Lord chastises Arjuna and says, you know, these are not befitting a person, you know, these, give up these emotions, they're not befitting a great person like you. The Lord gets Arjuna to a place of courage. So for all of us, we want to be able to try to get to a place of courage where we can transcend even the mode of goodness, because, you know, with the mode of goodness, there is still something, whilst mode of goodness isn't good enough, it is certainly a place where we must endeavor to get to. So Srila Prabhupada begins to end the purport with Narada Muni. Yes, as a child, he was in the forest. Yes, he was alone. Yes, he was, you know, literally abandoned by life. But as he becomes aware, Narada Muni doesn't go into the forest anymore. He turns, wherever he goes, Srila Prabhupada says, he turns that place into Vaikuntha. So what can we learn from that? That wherever a devotee goes, they bring Vrindavan, or they bring Vaikuntha to others. And what is Narada Muni's mission? That his prime goal is to alleviate the suffering of others. Remember last Monday we discussed that, you know, in the 14 planetary systems, you know, in the 14 different planets, that in the material world, whether in the heavenly planets, whether in the middle world, like the earth, or the lower planets, there's still always suffering. So Narada Muni is traveling from place to place, planet to planet, and he is converting, as Srila Prabhupada says, men, gods, kinnaras, gandharvas, that's the angels, the rishis, the munis, all to become devotees of the Lord. And by Narada Muni's activities, he engaged Prahlad Maharaj and Dhruva Maharaj and others. So Srila Prabhupada ends reminding us that pure devotees of the Lord always, always follow the great footsteps of great devotees, like Narada and Prahlad Maharaj. And they engage their whole time in glorifying the Lord, his form, his qualities, his pastimes, his character, and through kirtan, through the process of kirtan and preaching, one can actually transcend the material qualities. So how do we transcend the modes of material? That we, in every moment, we think about the Lord, his form, his pastimes, his qualities, and we get to a point where maybe we can wake up one day and ask, you know, in every moment, my Lord, is this pleasing to you if I do this? So by complete surrender and having the heart of Narada Muni, that he's so compassionate and kind, that he travels around and by alleviating the suffering of others, they become devotees. And you know, guess what, ladies and gentlemen, there's so many people out there suffering. Sometimes we may feel that we're not good enough to preach, or we're not good enough, but you know, it just starts with being kind and loving and just setting the example, be the example that, you know, others would like to see. And then slowly, you know, we can, wherever we go, whoever we see, that we can tell them about the Lord, his form, his qualities, his pastimes. And in that way, be free from the tinge of material contamination, and maybe somehow or another, through the Lord's mercy and the mercy of the devotees, that we can actually find our way back to the truth of who we are, that eternal loving consciousness, like Prahlad Maharaj and Dhruva Maharaj and Narada Muni, that eternal childlike state where we're not experiencing these horrible emotions and processes of life, where, you know, we're so embedded, we're so trapped in that crocodile of material life. We're just in those jaws. The jaws open up as we glorify the Lord and tell others about the Lord. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to stop and just invite you all to give your comments, contributions, and if you have any.
Break the ice then, shall I? I said I'll break the ice, Nandarani Mataji.
Thank you,
No.
Thank you. You know, they always say you got to sit tight for a little while, even if it gets really uncomfortable when everyone's silent. So thank you so much for breaking the ice.
Thank you very much for a lovely, lovely class. It's so wonderful. Thank you. Nice to have you regularly. I just on the note, I heard, I was actually listening only today to Radhanath Swami. My Guru Maharaj, he arrived today actually, so we went to see him at the airport. So we listened to a class on the way. And it was something really nice. They reminded us about this matter of where we are and where we need to go to, and whether we need to go to the forest or whether we need to go to Vrindavan. I think most people have this, because it says Mathura Vas is one of the criteria that we should be aiming for, which of course is a very high, lofty criteria. But it shouldn't be that in order for us to practice pure devotional service, we need to go to Vrindavan. Actually, if by us practicing pure devotional service wherever we are, we create Vrindavan where we are. So it is within us in terms of the environment that we create around us, in terms of what our sadhana is. Again, there is no need to go and look for Krishna everywhere. He's actually in your home, in your deity, in the mandir, and the deity in the mandir is in your heart. You just have to be able to see him everywhere. It's like Srila Prabhupada, when he used to do his morning walks, he would see everything intently and observe everything going on and see Krishna within everything. So it's a question of our vision. We can go in front of the deity, we can see either a marble statue or we can see the Lord personally present there. It's like the Gangaji, the Gangaji, the purity in the Ganga is not in actually the water. It may be contaminated. It may have chemicals in it, but the purity in the Ganga is in our faith in the Ganga being pure, not in the actual chemical composition of the Ganga. So like that, I think it's where we are, we can create purity by our pureness, or by our purity of our devotional sadhana, I should say, and sadhu sangha and devotional practice with devotees is very important. So just I thought I'd just add that little bit to your wonderful class. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Salish Bhai. Yes, you're right. It's all about perception, isn't it? It is about our level of gratitude and how we, and actually as the consciousness advances, then one can actually see the Lord and his mercy and gratitude in every moment, as you quite rightly said. For some, the Ganges will be poison, and for others, they will have the, as Srila Prabhupada says, the spiritual vision to be able to see that the Ganges isn't just quite what the material aspect that you see, but the Ganges is something greater and more subtle. So thank you for that, Salish Bhai. And actually, that's about our consciousness as well, isn't it? From what you're saying, that if we have a deficit consciousness, then we'll always feel like faith is outside, it's somewhere else. But as we read Bhagavad Gita and read Bhagavatam, we begin to understand the first steps of God realization is to see that the Lord is in everything and everyone. Then the Lord is within the heart, as certainly with Narada Muni, he connects to the Lord within the heart, so does Dhruva Maharaj. And then the Lord as a person. And here we're told that, start deity worship, because as you start deity worship, you will begin to experience the Lord as a person. So yeah, it's really about our perception. But I think if we put ourselves in the right environment, and we create the right environment like Mathura or Vrindavan within our own home, then somehow or another, perhaps we can, we've got to take the first step, even if we don't believe in it. We've got to just go with that. There's a question today, and the question is, Surabhi Mataji is asking, may I ask why grief is a low level of ignorance, and how can deep-rooted grief be uprooted practically? And she said, I'm here for practical knowledge. And sorry if this question isn't relevant. I think it's a wonderful question, Surabhi Mataji, because we don't want to be in a situation where we're just all theoretical. Spiritual life has to translate into time, place, circumstance, because time, place, circumstance is about practicality. Grief is an important emotion, and it's an important emotion that anyone who's suffered loss will go through it. And we need to be able to go through grief. For example, a lot of cultures will have, like Her Majesty the Queen's passed away, so her coffin's in state, and others can go and see the coffin and say goodbye. We have that within our own tradition, where families and friends will come to your house at least until the first 11 or 12 days, where there's mourning going on, there's support and things like that. Even within the old Victorian culture, the curtain was half closed, neighbors would be there would be support, people would wear black in mourning. So it's a very important emotion. But if grief is about the level of sadness and loss and despondency, but if you experience it for a very long period of time, then you can remain stuck almost at a place of regret and depression. Now, if you're stuck at that level, what they call chronic mourning or bereavement or remorse about the past. And look, I can tell you, Surabhi Mataji, I've gone through my own challenges of loss. I think within 4 years, I'd lost nearly the most significant part of my family. My mother passed away, then my younger brother had a brain hemorrhage, then my youngest brother passed away of cancer, and then my husband passed away. And I think within 3 or 4 years, I'd lost almost 5 people within my family, and there are reasons why grief happens. Of course, it's the immediate loss, but sometimes it's because we're told, don't be too emotional, this is not the body never dies, the soul never dies, you're attached to the body. So if we try to do artificial renunciation, or we try to push down our grief, then it will jump out with us like a jack in the box or a volcano. So if we're stuck too long at a place of grief, then we'll see sadness everywhere, and we'll see sadness in the whole world, and our it's almost like instead of wearing rose-tinted glasses, we wear glasses where it's almost like we're living in the cemetery of life. So that's where you're at the point where you're kind of stuck. And sometimes grief comes because there's a selfish loss in that as well, that when we feel deep sadness, it's because sometimes it's what that person could have done for us. It's what they could have been for us. It's what, I couldn't imagine someone losing a child, let alone, people they love. but often when you have sustained grief, there's something within us that we're not quite full within ourselves, that we think that somebody else is going to make us complete. I hope that helps, Surabhi Mataji, because you know, I hope it helps to explain why it's an important emotion, but we mustn't stay in it for too long. Do you want to say anything, Surabhi Mataji? I know you've responded on the text, but is there anything you'd like to say? Was that helpful? Would you like to unmute? Okay, she's commented and said, cemetery of life. I can relate to that. Thanks, it's very helpful. Okay, great.
I just help a little bit out there as well.
Yes, please do.
Sorry, Nandarani Mataji. I think the whole subject matter of the Bhagavad Gita was spoken on the basis of grief.
Yes.
It's a question of misplaced grief.
Yes.
I think grief is the natural byproduct of human nature because we have attachments one way or the other. It's a question of misplaced grief and the depth and the severity of that grief if it's materially bound. So a devotee still suffers grief when loved ones or the other devotees pass away, but it's because of the loss of a devotee. When it becomes a material attachment that you can't shake off, that becomes misplaced, which is what Arjun was suffering from. And thus Krishna spoke the Gita to effectively enlighten him. So I think it's a question of the as you said earlier, how you're dealing with it and whether you've got a spiritual vision attached to that grief. If it isn't and is materially bound, then it's misplaced. That's all I just wanted to add.
Yeah, no, that's really valuable. Thank you so much. Thank you relating it back to the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so if there isn't anything else, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. And I take the dust of your lotus feet and ask for your blessings and any forgiveness for any mistakes. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Mataji. Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.